Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. I have the rainbow chart up here again. Going to look at the result of the vertical lines that I had plotted here on some of the rainbow triggers from yesterday, and just talk about price action a little bit and how you might want to use these trigger points for your trading, and also take a look at what we can expect, how we would define a change of trend, and a little bit about market pattern. A lot of you probably know a lot of this already, but there may be some watching that are beginner traders, don't know how to handle certain situations. So let's take a look at a few things there. I'm going to take this in the context of, let's just say that we're only looking at the rainbow ribbons, that we're not using any of the other tools. So you can trade purely off of these, but to do that, I wouldn't just take every signal blindly. I want to look at what's happening with market structure, market pattern, what's the volatility level, and how I look at those things as the price action progresses as we come into each trigger point. So let's start with defining what we would consider to be a change of trend. You see I have this little note here. What happens at the trigger point? Question. Identify change of trend. Well, what is a change of trend? I'm going to say that a change of trend can be three things. It can be a reversal, it can be a continuation, or it can be a change in volatility, where we're going to get from volatility change, meaning we're going from a move up or down into a consolidation, or vice versa. So a change of trend could be coming out of a consolidation into a move then, and what would we call that? Well, that would be a breakout trade. So when we have volatility, we're looking for reversal, and when we have low volatility coming into a trigger, we would be looking to take a breakout trade. So in that context, then we also want to think about price action. Are we looking at a trend continuation? Is our trigger coming in at the end of a retracement, or are we completing a larger pattern and looking for a counter trend trade? And if we are looking at counter trend, what are we going to expect? So each situation you may handle a little bit differently. So let's take the triggers one by one of these that I had marked for yesterday, and see how we could have handled those scenarios. So the first trigger very early in the morning yesterday came in around 5:36, 5:38. Now this is a 4-minute Heikin-Ashi chart. So what do we have here? Well, we have a low right here. We made a three-wave move up, and then we started trading down into a wave 4. So now we're looking for another wave up. We get a long trade triggered here. What happens? It goes up marginally, and then we're going to get stopped out. So depending on how you handle your trades, this trade's going to be somewhat of a scratch or a small loss. Okay, so now we're trending down. Now we're into making, define the trend, higher highs, higher lows, or lower highs, lower lows, right? So at that point now, when we got knocked out of this particular trade, that was confirmation that a downtrend had started, because now we've got a lower high and we're making a lower low at this point. So now we're trading down into the next trigger. Now what happens in here? Before we come into this window, now we're looking at the A3, A4 here. What happens? We've got the A3 window starts before the A4 window does actually. Now our preference is the opposite color on the A3 and the A4, but what happens? We will get trigger points on the same color at the beginning or the end of these windows. So you have to consider all situations. So now when I blocked out this red rectangle here, I blocked out the A3 window, which overlaps this white window on A1, which can also be used as long as there's a larger even number window in play. So what happens as we hit into this window, we're moving down and then we start to go inside bars into consolidation. So in this frame here we actually have no trigger. There's no trade trigger right there because we're not going to trade inside bars. We're going to wait for something else. So what happens here? Now we're going into this really tight consolidation that's taking place inside the range of what was the low bar at the time here. So what happens? We actually have no signal on this particular trigger point because we're still trading inside. What happens then? When we're moving out of a consolidation, what are we going to look for at our trigger point? We're going to be looking for a breakout. So what happens? We get this breakout trade here right behind our trigger point, and that sets off a really nice move down. And then as we approach our next window, we've got a nice extended run down, and now we get to this A7, A8 window down here. We've got the A7 green overlaps again. So what happens? Now we're coming out of a volatility move looking for a reversal. So we get a long trade triggered on the green bar right there. Even though I didn't draw this line here yesterday because I was only showing the opposite colors, this is still a valid trade indication. So you could have taken that long with the green A7 window overlapping the A8. Now the next trigger point comes in at 10:16. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because it's getting kind of long. What happens here? We have a trigger point, but we don't have any sort of indication. We don't really have continuation because we haven't moved out of this range of the prior bars. So this is really a keep your powder dry, don't take a trade indication right here. So let's wait for the next trigger. The next trigger does come on the opposite color. We want to be awake and aware when we hit the first when we hit the window to begin with, because we've got white on A1 and A2. The trigger does come on the green A1 window though, where we get the Heikin Ashi color bar change, and that triggers a really nice long trade. So far what we've got here today, we've got a scratch out trade at the beginning. We've got a nice short on this breakout. You could have taken this long. We got no trade here on the consolidation, and then we get a really nice long on the reversal trade. Next up we have, what do we have here? We have a minor correction. We've got an uptrend. We've got a minor correction. Into our trigger point, we can take a long out of this. Now it took a couple of bars before we got a green bar confirmation, so you may or may not have wanted that. I would say as a general statement, you can use a couple bars either side of a trigger point. That'll be your decision. The next particular point in time that we're looking at, what happens here? We do not have a reversal, but this one here is a continuation. So what happens? When we have continuation trades, what generally happens is the amount of range that took place from the low into the trigger point area will be the same amount of movement we will get on continuation, which is just about what we got into the next signal. And right here then what happens? We got the next signal, we're at a high, so this would be, we'd be looking for a reversal. We consolidate a couple bars and then we get a couple bars down. So we don't get the trigger until the third bar outside the window. So you may or may not want to take that trade. Again, I prefer 2 bars, so I would treat this as a non-signal, but even if you took it, you got a little bit of a down move and then it started to come back to you, so you should have at least had a scratch trade. So what happens here over the course of this day, you got a couple of scratch trades. You get a small trade long here if you took that. the continuation you may or may not have taken, but you caught two really good moves. You caught the short breakdown off the consolidation here, and then you caught this nice long off the white and green A1, A2 here. So either way, however you would have handled this, just using the rainbow alone, you should have made, pardon my French, a shit ton of money on this day. So that's it. I know it's a little bit longer today, but I wanted to point out a few things. Hopefully this will help some of you out. We'll see you again Thursday.